Hey, welcome to episode 4 of the June Gems. So, in the previous episode, or previous two episodes, we kind of got the basics of the in-text workflow, in-text forms, and where to find some of the common things, where to find the in-text workflow designer for lists and libraries and sites, etc. Well, now I want to talk about some of the things you should know about that's available within the in-text workflow designer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a really basic workflow example, and we're just going to send a notification. So here's my send notification action. It's actually one of the commonly used ones. So let's just drag that onto the design canvas. All right, there you go. So what I'm going to do is double click on this. First of all, you can double click on the actual image here to open up the configuration window, or you can click on the drop down, which you can click on the configure button in the menu there. But notice there's a few other bits and pieces you can use. All right, so let's double click on this and open up. So this is what happens with every action. Every action you can open up the configuration for it, and you'll have a similar sort of window that you can configure all these little options for. So what I'm going to focus on in this episode is what are the properties that are available to us as we're building out the workflow, because they'll be different depending on whether you're building a list workflow or a document library workflow or a site workflow. So, what are the things that we can use without having to go and query for things and all that sort of stuff? So first of all, because we're using a send notification, we have a to address. So there's an empty field. Now, of course, you can type anything you want in there. I can put in some email address, or I can click on this little button on the right, which is a little browse button. So notice it looks like a little book. I'm going to click on this. And in here, you'll see a number of different things. First of all, you can have like a people picker where you can do a search inside your organization and look for people, look for groups, Active Directory, all that sort of stuff. Pretty cool, right? Different views as well. So let's say all users. I don't have that many users in my VM. So you can see there's a bunch of people, or there would be a bunch of people that you could use. The other thing you can do, external addresses. So you can definitely send emails outside of your tenant or outside of your SharePoint environment. But the other thing I want to focus on is right here, which is lookup. Now, there are a number of common properties, and you'll see in bold here, this is the name of the little category here, common. So there's a number of common properties that we can use. There are two that I actually want to focus on, and that is right here, the initiator. That is the person who actually caused this workflow to kick off, right? So it could have been the person who submitted the request or modified an item or uploaded a document. Whatever it is that causes that workflow to start, the initiator is the person that actually caused that event. The other thing that's really nice out of the box is a manager field. So this is smart enough to actually realize whoever the initiator is, it's going to go off and figure out who is the manager. Because a lot of the workflows that you'll find that you're building will actually assign a task to the manager of the person who submitted that request. So it's nice to be able to do that, right? Get this common property without having to then go and query SharePoint groups or SharePoint or Active Directory or whatever it is, or some other list where you keep your org chart. This is smart enough to realize what this is. Okay, so let's just do the initiator for now. Click on OK, and there it is. You'll see initiator underscore. All right. Now then you've got a subject field. So notice all the little red asterisks that are just saying these are required fields. So for subject, let's just do the same thing. We'll click on insert reference. Now you can type in stuff into here. So you can just say this is the subject, right? So, oops, can't spell. There you go. And then you can do other things. You can say insert the list name that we're currently on, or the site name. Or look at the top here, there's also some other things you can use. Now this is a slightly different view of what we looked at before. This is the insert reference window, but it's very similar to that little browse button that we did. So here are all our common properties. You'll notice manager and initiator are still in here. But then you'll see some other things you can use. There's item properties. Now if you're running or if you're building a workflow that's on a list or a document library, this gives you access to all the item fields as well as some of the hidden fields like modified by, modified ID, all that sort of stuff. So those are really important because you can start building up some dynamic text in your subject or in the body of your email by just inserting all these item properties. Now we have workflow constants. these are basically, I'll go into those a little bit later, but these are just like global pieces of data that you can use in all your workflows. Nice centralized place. Okay, we've got inline functions. These are give you the ability to actually modify some text at runtime, right? So for example, you might say, let's get rid of that. And what we'll do is we will insert the title of the current item. Now, one of the things the title might have is spaces on either side of it. So what you might want to do is say, I want to get rid of those spaces. So let's go to the front of title and click on inline functions, and there is a trim inline function. You can see as soon as you select it, it says removes the leading and trailing white space from a string. It even gives you an example of how to use it. So I can double click on this. Let's get rid of that and put a bracket on the end, and there we go. There's an inline function that at runtime will actually trim all the white space from the title. So pretty easy to do. Now there is something else. As you're building out a workflow, you're going to need some containers to store some data into, and those are these variables. So you can see at the top here, we've got variables. Let's close this action. We also have it under workflow settings here. So I can do things like text trimmed title. And you see we have a number of different types of variables: single line text, number, date, time, yes, no collection, which is I use quite a bit. So we'll just call it text trimmed title and click save. Now a variable is just a container for the current workflow to store some data into, and you can read and update it as you need to. So what we can do, what we can do is actually come over here and say, let's build some text, build a string. There it is there. And I'm going to do something similar to what I did with the previous inline function, which is doing a little bit of trimming. So click on insert reference. Here's my inline function, trim. Right, I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to click inside the brackets, go to item properties, and now I'm going to click on title. Right, notice how that's going to build up that little bit of dynamic text. Now the other thing I want you to notice is as soon as we added a variable to our workflow, when I click on insert reference, you'll notice I have common, item properties, workflow constants, inline functions, and now we have workflow variables. So I can use these here as well. So click on OK. Now I'm going to store that in my variable. There's my text trim title. So we're going to do all that in this action. Come over here, open up my send notification, and now instead of doing this craziness in here, I can simply click on this button, go to my workflow variables and double click on text trim title. It goes into here, click on OK, and there it is. Right? So it's really important to note that there are things that you're going to be able to use throughout your workflow that you don't have to do a whole bunch of querying for. You can use the common properties, you can use the item properties, you can use workflow constants, you can use workflow variables, inline functions to do some manipulation of some text and some calculations. They're all there for you to use to save you a whole bunch of time. Now, just to sort of go back to that manager token that's in the common properties, if I didn't have that, I would potentially be doing something like this, using a query LDAP action, which is just way too hard for something that I need to do something very simple for, which is just get the manager. So don't worry about that. Simply open up your actions that you want to use the manager in. Let's say this time I want to get rid of that. Click on the little browse button. Come down here under Lookup. There's my manager. And you can just double click on that. The awesome thing is we also have the manager's display name. So I can come down here and say, hi, click on the insert reference, go to manager's display name. And now you'll see it says hi manager display name. And then you can say, click on this again. Instead of the managers, let's deal with the initiator's display name. Has put in the following request for a, and then again click on that, and now go to item properties and just put in the title. Thank you, management team. Right? So definitely utilize the existing common tokens, the item properties, the workflow constants, workflow variables, inline functions, because they will definitely make your life a lot easier. I'll go through some more of inline functions and workflow constants and workflow variables in future episodes. Hopefully this helps you with getting to know Nintex workflow a little bit better.